Chapter 1: The New Hire. The lunch shift at Hoop Dreams was a whirlwind of clattering plates, hurried footsteps, and the rhythmic hum of conversation. Situated in the heart of Atlanta, the restaurant wasn't just another trendy eatery, it was a destination. From its sleek wooden interiors, bathed in warm lighting, to the iconic jerseys and signed basketballs encased on the walls, every corner spoke to the legacy of Shaquille O'Neal. But unlike other celebrity-owned establishments, Hoop Dreams wasn't a vanity project. Its menu boasted Southern-inspired dishes with a modern twist, crafted under the guidance of top-tier chefs, and the place was packed almost every night. Jason Carver stood behind the host's stand, his pristine white shirt neatly tucked into black slacks. His apron was spotless, he'd made sure of that before clocking in. Today was his first day as a server at Hoop Dreams, and though he wouldn't admit it, he was a bundle of nerves. "This is the place to be if you want to prove yourself," he muttered under his breath, rehearsing the pep talk he'd been giving himself since he landed the job. "Make an impression, Jason. Show them you're not just another waiter." "Talking to yourself already?" came a voice to his left. Jason turned to see Carly, a veteran server, balancing a tray of drinks with one hand and holding a tablet in the other. Her blonde hair was tied into a practical ponytail, and her sharp eyes seemed to take in everything around her at once. "Just psyching myself up," Jason replied, straightening his posture. "Good luck with that," Carly said, smirking. "This place will chew you up and spit you out if you're not quick on your feet. And just so you know, there's no room for egos here. We work as a team." Jason bristled slightly at the unsolicited advice but forced a smile. "Got it. Teamwork." Carly gave him a once-over, her smirk softening. "Listen, kid, you'll be fine as long as you follow the basics, be polite, stay professional, and don't forget who owns this place." Jason raised an eyebrow. "You mean Shaquille O'Neal? The basketball guy?" "Yeah, the basketball guy." Carly's tone was lightly mocking. "He's not just the owner, he's the reason we're on the map. And he's known to drop in whenever he feels like it, so keep that in mind." Jason chuckled, shaking his head. "Right. I'll be sure to roll out the red carpet if he shows up." Carly's eyes narrowed. "Don't underestimate him. This place isn't just a vanity project for Shaq. He cares about it, more than you'd think. And trust me, he won't hesitate to call you out if you step out of line." Jason shrugged, hiding his skepticism. In his mind, celebrities were all the same, dabbling in industries they didn't understand, using their fame to cover up a lack of expertise. He wasn't here for Shaq or the restaurant's reputation, he was here to make a name for himself. Chapter 2: The VIP Table. By the time the dinner shift rolled around, the restaurant was a hive of activity. The bar was packed with patrons sipping craft cocktails, while waitstaff darted between tables, balancing trays piled high with dishes like smoked brisket sliders and sweet potato fries. The smell of caramelized onions and seared steak wafted from the open kitchen, mingling with the chatter of diners. Jason was midway through taking an order when he noticed a ripple of excitement near the entrance. Heads turned, phones emerged, and a wave of murmurs swept through the room. Curious, Jason craned his neck to see what the fuss was about. Standing in the doorway was none other than Shaquille O'Neal. Dressed in a casual tracksuit and sneakers, his presence was impossible to ignore. At over 7 feet tall, he towered over everyone around him, exuding an aura of effortless charisma. He greeted a few fans with fist bumps and wide smiles before making his way to a corner booth reserved for VIPs. Flanked by 3 friends, Shaq settled into the oversized seating, his laughter booming across the room. Jason's heart sank as Carly approached him with a sly grin. "Guess who's taking table 10? "Me?" Jason asked, his voice rising an octave. "Shouldn't someone else? You wanted to prove yourself, right?" Carly interrupted, shoving a notepad into his hands. Here's your chance. Jason swallowed hard, his palms suddenly clammy. He wiped them on his apron and approached the table, forcing a smile. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Hoop Dreams. My name is Jason, and I'll be your server tonight. Shaq glanced up, his friendly expression putting Jason slightly at ease. What's good, young blood? Jason chuckled nervously. We've got a lot of great options. Can I start you off with drinks? Maybe the Big Diesel margarita? It's a house favorite. Shaq raised an eyebrow, amused. That's cute. Just water for now. As Shaq's friends chimed in with their drink orders, Jason scribbled furiously, determined not to mess up. But when one of the guests made a joke about the calorie counts on the menu, Jason couldn't resist muttering under his breath, well, maybe if people didn't order like it's their last meal. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Jason froze, realizing too late that Shaq had heard him. The jovial atmosphere at the table evaporated in an instant. What was that? Shaq's deep voice cut through the noise like a referee's whistle. His sharp gaze locked onto Jason, who suddenly felt very small. I didn't mean anything by it, Jason stammered, his cheeks flushing. Shaq leaned back, his massive frame somehow seeming even larger. You got something to say about the way we're ordering? Jason opened his mouth, then closed it, at a complete loss for words. The silence stretched uncomfortably, broken only by the clinking of glasses at nearby tables. Finally, Shaq's expression softened, and a slow grin spread across his face. Relax, young blood, he said, his tone lightening. Just bring us the food. Jason nodded quickly and retreated to the kitchen, his heart pounding. Carly intercepted him near the pass, her arms crossed. What did you do? Nothing. Jason protested, though his face betrayed his guilt. I just made a comment. Carly groaned. You don't just make comments to the owner of the restaurant, Jason. Chapter 3, The Owner Revealed. Jason paced nervously near the kitchen, trying to shake the awkward exchange from his mind. He delivered a few other orders, avoiding eye contact with table 10. Yet no matter how busy the restaurant was, he couldn't stop thinking about Shaq's grin, or how it had seemed friendly until it wasn't. Relax, young blood, Jason muttered to himself, mimicking Shaq's deep voice as he arranged plates on a tray. Just bring us the food. Easy for him to say. Jason hadn't even been in the industry long enough to master keeping his cool under pressure, and now he'd managed to tick off the most important person in the building. Table 10's food is up, barked Chef Dante, the head chef, whose no-nonsense demeanor made the kitchen a stress zone of its own. Jason snapped back to reality, grabbed the tray, and took a deep breath before walking to the VIP booth. The atmosphere at table 10 seemed relaxed again, punctuated by bursts of laughter from Shaq and his companions. Jason carefully set down the plates, making sure not to spill or tip anything. Here you go, he said, forcing himself to sound cheerful. The steak and lobster for you, sir. Fried catfish with mac and cheese for you. And the barbecue chicken sliders for. Before he could finish, one of Shaq's friends interrupted. Yo, this catfish smells insane. Dante's really doing his thing back there. Shaq nodded appreciatively and picked up his knife and fork. Let's see if it tastes as good as it smells. He took a bite of the brisket he'd ordered and chewed slowly, nodding with approval. Jason took that as his cue to leave, but before he could retreat, Shaq raised a hand to stop him. Hold up, young blood. Jason froze, plastering a smile on his face. Yes, sir? You new here, right? Shaq asked, his tone casual but probing. Jason shifted uncomfortably. Yes, sir. First day, actually. Shaq leaned back, eyeing him with a mix of curiosity and amusement. First day, and you already got jokes. You think that's a smart move? Jason hesitated, glancing nervously at the other diners who were starting to take notice. It wasn't a joke. I mean, it kind of was, but I didn't mean any disrespect. Shaq's friends exchanged amused looks, clearly enjoying the exchange. Disrespect? Shaq echoed, his voice rising slightly. This is my place. You gotta be careful what you say in here. Jason's eyes widened. Wait, your place? Shaq's grin returned, wider this time, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. He pointed to the jerseys on the walls, each bearing his name and number. You didn't know? Jason's stomach dropped. His gaze darted to the decor, autographed basketballs, framed photos of Shaq's career milestones, even a life-size cardboard cutout of the man himself near the entrance. How had he missed it? I knew you were connected to the restaurant, but I didn't realize you owned it? Shaq finished for him. Yeah, I own it. So when you're cracking jokes about how people eat, you're talking about my customers. And when you mess with my customers, you mess with me. Jason's throat went dry. He stammered out an apology, but Shaq held up a hand to stop him. Relax, Shaq said, laughing. I'm not mad. But I'll tell you this, working in a place like this? It's not about you. It's about the people who come here. You gotta treat everyone like they're the MVP. Think you can handle that? Jason nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Shaq's grin turned into a chuckle. Good. Now get back to work, and don't let me catch you slacking. Jason hurried away, his cheeks burning with embarrassment. As he passed Carly, she gave him a knowing look. Told you not to underestimate him. Chapter 4, Lessons on the Floor. Jason's nerves hadn't stopped buzzing since his run-in with Shaq earlier that evening. Every step he took around the dining area felt heavy with pressure, as if the weight of the entire restaurant rested on his shoulders. He couldn't help but feel like a spotlight was constantly on him, watching for his next mistake. It didn't help that the VIP table was still alive with laughter and energy. Shaq and his friends seemed to be having the time of their lives, cracking jokes and exchanging stories that carried across the room. Jason, meanwhile, worked his section with the precision of someone terrified of another slip-up. The dinner rush hit full force, and the kitchen was a cacophony of shouts, clanging pots, and sizzling pans. Jason found himself racing back and forth between the kitchen and the tables, balancing trays of food with care. His hands were steady, but his mind wasn't. He kept replaying Shaq's words in his head. You gotta treat everyone like they're the MVP. It was simple advice, but it hit Jason harder than he expected. In the heat of the moment, he realized he hadn't been giving his best to the customers, not just Shaq, but everyone. Instead, he'd been rushing, treating them like tasks to check off rather than people to serve. As he delivered an order to a table of regulars, the older man at the head of the table smiled warmly. Thanks, son. You've got a good attitude about you. Keep it up. Jason blinked, caught off guard. Thank you, he replied, his voice tinged with surprise. The man chuckled. No need to look so shocked. Good service doesn't go unnoticed. Jason felt a spark of pride light in his chest. He straightened up, nodding. I appreciate that. The compliment lingered with him as he continued his rounds. Slowly, Jason began to relax, his movements becoming more fluid and confident. He greeted each table with genuine warmth, checking in on guests with a sincerity that hadn't been there earlier. Chapter 5: Shaq's Silent Test. As the evening wore on, Shaq leaned back in his booth, his plate nearly empty save for a few scraps of brisket. He had been watching Jason closely, though not obviously enough for the rookie to notice. "Man's moving different now," one of Shaq's friends said, nodding toward Jason, who was helping a young couple decide between two desserts. Shaq grinned. "Told you. Kid's got potential. Just needed a push." "You gonna tell him you've been watching the whole time?" another friend asked, smirking. Shaq shook his head. "Not yet. Let him find his rhythm first." Jason, meanwhile, was oblivious to the fact that he was under surveillance. His focus was on a family of 4 at a nearby table. The 2 kids were squabbling over who got the last fry, and the parents looked exasperated. Jason crouched slightly to their level, his voice gentle. "How about this?" he offered, sliding over an extra plate of fries he'd snagged from the kitchen. "On the house. No need to argue now, right?" The kids cheered, and the parents looked at him with relief. "Thank you," the mother said. "You didn't have to do that." Jason smiled. "It's no trouble. Enjoy your meal." Shaq watched the interaction with a satisfied nod. "See that?" he said to his friends. "That's what I'm talking about. Going the extra mile." Chapter 6: Redemption and Recognition. By the time the dinner rush ended, Jason was drenched in sweat but felt oddly triumphant. His earlier blunder with Shaq had all but faded from his mind as he focused on the positives: happy customers, smoother service, and the occasional nod of approval from Carly or Chef Dante. As he finished wiping down a table, Carly sidled up next to him. "You survived," she said, smirking. "Barely," Jason replied, leaning against the back of a chair. "I thought for sure I'd get fired after what happened with Shaq." Carly laughed. "Oh, please. Shaq's not the type to fire someone for a rookie mistake. Embarrass you a little, sure. But he likes to see if you'll rise to the occasion." Jason frowned. "Wait, you're saying this was, like, a test?" "More like a lesson," Carly said, shrugging. "He's big on teaching people. Literally and figuratively." Jason sighed, shaking his head. "Guess I've got a lot to learn." "That's why you're here," Carly said, her tone softer. "Nobody's perfect on their first day. You've already come a long way." The encouragement felt good, but Jason knew he wasn't done proving himself. Chapter 7: The Family Meal. At the end of the night, Shaq called the staff together for the traditional family meal, a time when the team could sit down together, share a meal, and decompress after a busy shift. The dining area, now quiet and dimly lit, felt worlds away from the chaos of the earlier rush. Jason found himself sitting across from Shaq, who was digging into a plate of fried chicken with enthusiasm. Shaq looked up, noticing Jason's hesitation. "You ain't gonna eat?" Jason shrugged. "I guess I'm still nervous about earlier." Shaq wiped his hands on a napkin and leaned forward, his expression serious. "Listen, young blood. You think I never messed up on my first day? My first season in the league? Everybody's got a learning curve. What matters is how you bounce back." Jason nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. "And tonight," Shaq continued, gesturing with a drumstick, "you bounced back. I saw you out there. Handling tables, fixing problems, keeping people happy. That's what it's about." Jason felt a swell of pride but kept his voice humble. "Thanks, boss. I appreciate that." Shaq grinned. You're not just working for a paycheck here, kid. You're learning how to win. Keep hustling, and you're gonna go far. As the family meal continued, Jason found himself laughing along with the team, his earlier nerves replaced by a sense of belonging. For the first time that day, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. Chapter 8: A Future Beyond the Floor. Weeks turned into months, and Jason quickly became one of the most reliable members of the team. He learned to anticipate customers' needs, memorize the regulars' favorite orders, and even started helping train new hires. One evening, as the restaurant was winding down, Shaq called Jason into his office. The walls were lined with memorabilia from his basketball career, but the desk was cluttered with spreadsheets and restaurant plans. "Take a seat," Shaq said, motioning to a chair. Jason sat down, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "What's up, boss?" Shaq leaned back, studying him. "You've come a long way since day one. You're not just a waiter anymore, you're a leader." Jason blinked. "Me? A leader?" "Yeah," Shaq said, nodding. "You've got the right mindset now. And if you keep working hard, I think you could manage a place like this someday. Maybe even own one." Jason's eyes widened. "Own one? You really think I could do that?" Shaq grinned. "Why not? You've got what it takes. All you need is the drive to keep going." Jason left the office that night feeling more motivated than ever. What had started as a simple job had turned into a path toward a future he hadn't dared to dream of. Chapter 9: The Road to Ownership. Jason's life began to transform after his heartfelt conversation with Shaq. The idea of owning a restaurant, something he once dismissed as unattainable, now burned brightly in his mind. Shaq's belief in his potential was the catalyst, but Jason knew the real work lay ahead. Jason began immersing himself in every aspect of the restaurant business. Early mornings were spent shadowing Carly in the office, learning the intricacies of payroll, scheduling, and managing supplier relationships. Afternoons saw him side by side with Chef Dante, not just preparing meals but understanding food costs, menu planning, and ingredient sourcing. "You're a sponge, Jason," Carly said one day as they filed invoices. "You're absorbing everything. Most people wouldn't put in this much effort." Jason chuckled, looking at his growing stack of notes. "I can't let Shaq down. If he sees something in me, I need to prove him right." Carly placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You've already proven yourself. Just don't burn out trying to be perfect." Despite the long hours, Jason found himself more energized than ever. He even began attending industry seminars on his days off, soaking up knowledge about branding, customer service, and modern dining trends. Each seminar was another building block in his growing confidence. Chapter 10: Shaq's Surprise Invitation. One evening, after the dinner rush had settled into a quiet hum, Shaq called Jason to the side. "You free tomorrow?" Shaq asked casually, his imposing frame leaning against the bar. Jason blinked, confused. "Yeah, I guess." "Why?" Shaq smirked. "I want you to come with me. Dress sharp and be at this address by 10 a.m. He handed Jason a business card. The next morning, Jason found himself standing in front of a sleek downtown office building. He smoothed his borrowed tie nervously before stepping inside. The lobby was pristine, filled with the murmur of conversations and the click of polished shoes on marble floors. "Jason!" Shaq's deep voice echoed as he approached, looking every bit the mogul in a tailored suit. "You ready?" Shaq asked, clapping Jason on the back. "For what?" Jason replied, his voice tinged with nerves. Shaq grinned. "You'll see." They entered a spacious conference room where Shaq's team of consultants, chefs, and business strategists were gathered. Charts and spreadsheets covered the walls, detailing restaurant concepts, growth projections, and market trends. "For today," Shaq said, gesturing toward the room, "you're sitting in as my apprentice. Pay attention, take notes, and don't be afraid to ask questions." Jason's jaw dropped. He wasn't just here to observe, he was here to learn. Chapter 11: The Heart of the Community. As Jason delved deeper into the business, Shaq began teaching him about the role of a restaurant in its community. One day, Shaq invited Jason to a charity event the restaurant was hosting. "We're feeding over 100 families today," Shaq explained as they prepared boxes of food in the kitchen. "This isn't just about business, it's about giving back." Jason watched as volunteers bustled around, loading meals into vans and greeting families warmly. A young girl approached Jason, clutching a handmade thank you card. "This is for you," she said shyly, handing it over. Jason knelt to accept the card, his throat tightening as he read her carefully written words of gratitude. Shaq watched from a distance, his face softening. Later, as they cleaned up, Jason turned to Shaq. "I didn't realize how much impact a restaurant could have. It's more than just food." Shaq nodded, his expression serious. "Exactly. A good restaurant doesn't just serve meals, it serves its community. Remember that." Chapter 12: A Life-Changing Offer. Months later, Shaq called Jason into his office. "You've come a long way," Shaq began, his tone thoughtful. "And I think you're ready for something bigger." Jason tilted his head, puzzled. "Bigger?" Shaq leaned forward. "There's a location I've been eyeing downtown. Smaller than this place, but full of potential. I want you to manage it." Jason froze. "Me? Manage an entire restaurant?" "You've got what it takes," Shaq said confidently. "And I'll be here to guide you. But it's time for you to step up." Jason's mind raced. He thought of all he'd learned, all the late nights and early mornings spent mastering the business. Fear and excitement warred within him, but he knew this was the opportunity he'd been working toward. Chapter 13: A Grand Opening. The new restaurant opened 6 months later. The soft opening drew a modest crowd, but the grand opening was a spectacle. The buzz of excited customers filled the air, and Jason moved through the dining room with purpose, ensuring every table was happy and every plate was perfect. Shaq arrived with a group of friends, taking his usual seat in the corner. Jason couldn't help but feel the pressure of Shaq's watchful gaze, but he channeled it into focus. By the end of the night, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Customers praised the food, the service, and the welcoming atmosphere. As the evening wound down, Shaq pulled Jason aside. "You crushed it, man. I knew you would." Jason smiled, his earlier doubts fading. "Thanks, Shaq. For everything. You earned this," Shaq said firmly. "But remember, this is just the beginning. Keep pushing, keep learning, and keep giving back. That's how you win." Epilogue: Building a Legacy. Years later, Jason stood in front of a bustling restaurant, watching as families and friends gathered to share meals and laughter. The downtown location had become a cornerstone of the community, and Jason's reputation as a restaurateur had grown. Shaq, now more of a mentor and less of a boss, visited occasionally, always with the same proud smile. Jason never forgot the lessons Shaq had taught him: to work hard, to lead with heart, and to never underestimate the power of food to bring people together. As Jason greeted a new group of diners, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come, from a nervous waiter to a confident owner. His journey was proof that even the most unexpected moments could lead to something extraordinary. And he was just getting started.